So wrapping up Data Innovation Summit 2018, what is your conclusions and what have you heard so far today? If we start with Anders.
It's been really a great mix. I've been at the machine learning and AI stage, and I think one of the most obvious themes is that machine learning and AI is no longer one of those experimental, exciting projects far ahead. It's really been integrated in the core of many businesses, and it's really high on the agenda on many businesses. So that was visible. There was a lot of talks on rather how you productionize efficiently, how you serve models, and all these aspects that comes a bit later in the process. Towards really productionizing machine learning and AI. So that was really obvious.
You can really see some case examples now and collected data. If you look 2 years back, then we were talking about, as you said, Lars, before the future. Now we are in the future. So.
Exactly. You could actually observe companies that have done things, right? If you go back a couple of years, you would hear a lot about plans and things that are important and the visions we have. Now we saw a number of like data lake and data platform projects and actual real learnings from these projects, and that was great fun to see.
David, you mentioned I heard you mentioned something interesting today. It was something about a book, and what was that?
Well, the funny thing was I spoke with a number of panelists today, and many of them spoke about the same things. The book that everyone mentioned was Weapons of Math Destruction.
Sounds lovely.
It's a pop book, and it explains a little bit how you can go wrong with statistics and that kind of thing if you're not careful. And so why it pays to be a little bit aware of how statistics can be used properly and how the scientific method works in general.
Yeah, also in my panel, we're talking about when you have the anomaly where there is something that is actually an error or something wrong with the data, and how do you handle that? So do you have any examples of what could have gone wrong when the data or when you...
Well, this came up in other discussions when we were talking about how AI can be biased potentially, and understanding the concept of confounding variables and that kind of thing, where a model might not be wrong, but the explanation might not be as simple as what it seems, because there might be confounding variables that are hiding what the real cause of some prediction is.
We'll come back to you with the GDPR thing.
On our end, there was surprisingly little talk actually about the ethics and maybe bias in AI. I think there's one interesting discussion that came up that there's a lot of criticism around how bias can be built in these automatic data-driven systems. But it's also, I think, a big opportunity in actually quantifying and isolating that bias and doing something about it. And we had some talkers saying that it's easier to do something about a bias that you can identify in a system than the bias that's in all of us humans. I think it's also an opportunity to actually remove and improve how bias is built.
It can be very systematic in how we analyze those biases. And actually, I think this is an opportunity, rather, to remove biases than the other way around.
Yeah, that was one other conclusion that came out.
Do you have any examples of opportunities or the positive things of how you can use data from now and in the future connected to?
There are these, a bit sad, obvious examples of like face recognition working much better for white male than women in general, or just because of how what data is available and what data has been used for training. But if that's the case, then you can really prove it and test it in the system and prove that it's there and do something about it. If this discrimination or aspects is just in our heads, it's really hard to really prove that it's there when it's in people. If it's in a system, at least you can
change the data set.
You can test it and prove it and do something about it, I think.
I think we'll see regulations down the road in this area. I think GDPR 2.1 will include regulations such as you have to prove that your systems are unbiased with respect to gender or race.
It's a bit interesting because you don't have to prove that your board members are non-biased, that your personnel is non-biased. So that could be positive. That you actually, when it's built into a system, a lot of more high-level decisions, suddenly you can start actually testing and proving whether it's biased or not. So that's
so interesting when most of the companies are always cross-border, and if you look at how data is handled in one country and compared to another, if we take an example with UK, most of the cases you do tell your sexuality, or you do tell the background that you have. That in Sweden is normally not legal, or it is not legal. So So when you collect that type of data and you share that, then you have all these challenges. Lars, what else did you bring with you
Well,
from the day?
there was a lot of talk about the GDPR, obviously, since this is GDPR spring. And my observation in general about GDPR, both in the presentations today and among the companies that I have observed, is that people have very different angles on GDPR. Like some are not worried at all. If we just started, we should probably be fine. And some are very scared and throw away data, or there's even one company leaving the EU market. And on the other hand, some of the most technical competent companies are in very good shape in terms of the GDPR, but those are only a few.
Oh, that's super interesting, and we talked about before. That's what's going to happen is, of course, the pilot cases. Unfortunately, that's going to come, but that's retro, or that's reactive. Instead of how can we be proactive? How can we simulate and think what could go wrong? I know, David, you mentioned something before about the 2 points and how you can analyze and guess the person's.
I think there's many situations where it's not going to be clear beforehand exactly how the law is going to be interpreted. And so you might have data where you think you've done your best, and only time will be able to tell when somebody's taken to court and will have to prove, in a court of law that they did due diligence or whatever it takes. So I think that's the way it's going to go. Somebody will have to be the sacrificial lamb eventually.
Yeah, with the agile system, let's in 2 years or 6 months' time apply some nanotechnology to this, and then whoops, we found something very interesting in the system.
But there was some good advice that I got this morning, which was you can minimize your proverbial attack surface by doing well by your customer. So what you can do is imagine if you had a customer call in and ask for all their private data and ask what you're doing with their data, would you have a good answer? And if your answer is good, that reduces your risk considerably.
I think on the AI machine learning track, one I think really sane part of the development is that people seem to talk about AI or machine learning as more of a gradual scale now. I mean, from just any sort of statistical analytics, data-driven insights, to the range out to more AI and deep learning. I mean, it's more of I think before there's been this hype around that it's something completely different than data-driven analytics, and now there seems to be more of a gradual scale between advanced data-driven analytics and standard classical analytics, which I think is quite a reasonable development. So that's
AI versus the ML. Now
it just
collaborate between the two.
Yeah, it seems that now it's more on par with what's actually going on. Like there's all these levels between any general analytics, statistics. The more advanced methods you use, the more, you start calling it machine learning, and then you start calling it AI at some point, depending on what situation you are.
I think we see applications in that gray zone area, like predictive maintenance and outlier detection, or on the borderline between machine learning and analytics.
Yeah,
and we saw some of that today. Yeah.
It's not such a distinct difference, like distinct boundary between old methods and new methods. I think that makes sense to me. I think it's a good development.
Some of us had more B2B stages, and the interesting part of when we talk about the heavy asset industry, for example, when you move from offshore to onshore, or in mining, where you are not as much present in the mining anymore, but you're actually in your data house, or you're sitting somewhere else, and how do you keep the communication between the data scientist and the people working at the spot? There was a great example about, and I don't remember which company, but it was about the captain of the ship getting instructions from the data, data scientist as the dashboard, and the captain said, of course, why should I listen to you? You should drive 12 degrees through the storm. And he's like, what's your experience about this? So what they did was that they put the captain together with the data scientist for a while, so they could really start to communicate and understand each other's language. I think it was a great example for how do you work cross departments in organizations, with the business, with the digital part, to collaborate more and actually enable these solutions. Do you have any experience from?
Machine learning is definitely a team sport. I mean, you need several different legs in order to build a machine learning product. You need the data science, of course, but you also need the data engineering to actually turn it into a product, and you need a sort of a business angle or product ownership angle in order to make a product that provides real business value. And I've seen several examples of where this balance is like tilting one way or another, or where the different parties don't cooperate, and then you can still make things, but you never turn them into real business value.
Who has the mandate and who has the power to lead in one way or direction projects?
Well, that has to be a balance. I don't think it can work well with the balance, and it's up to like leadership and management to make sure that you have these mixes, the right mixes in the team, so that people can learn from each other. And it's also the tooling also matter. If these people work in different types of tools, then they won't communicate and collaborate. If they can work in the same types of tools, they can.
How do you enable from this spider net of so many different type of applications and platforms, and being agile to collaborate, and then add on top of that in the future? I mean, we shouldn't even go into talking about the bags and with the old system, but in all the industries, do you have any good insights on that from today, where they have some good solutions, where they have combined multiple different type of platforms or applications and being successful with that?
I don't know if I have a good answer to that, but it's really clear the trend that you're trying to create platform-based applications that to solve like more holistic view on making it easy to, on a really high level, like in machine learning and AI, to solve complex problems, to remove all the dull repetitive tasks and make it really easy to solve complex problem with a simple graphical user interface. I mean, we had some presentations on graphical user interface for really efficient data exploration without needing too much knowledge on how to use databases, how to really do data crunching. And same as Luca from Peltarion, they're offering a platform, very holistic platform for doing all your AI modeling in-house. And I think this is an obvious trend. It's still up to proof, like how efficient they've solved these problems and what the limitations are of these products. But there's a lot of those products being developed at the moment.
We saw a good presentation from Klarna on the subject, where they have, under a number of years, built a self-service platform, and thereby lower the requirements on the users of the platform to have like developer experience or engineering competence, and so that analysts or data scientists can go in right away and benefit from the Hadoop-based infrastructure they have. And that platform looks at a glance very similar to what we built like 5 years ago at Spotify to make things self-service. And these are obviously mature companies, mature data-driven companies, where with hundreds of people getting value from data on a day-to-day basis. But I think that's the path that we will see for other companies as well to follow, but lagging a few years behind.
So what do you think is going to happen in the like application-based open source and the collaboration between external parts in the future? It's a very, very open and broad question. You can kind of, in terms of value, for example, and the opportunities that come, you can kind of compare with your organizations when you are able to start to collaborate externally and create your ecosystem with other components, other sponsors or partners within the system. I'm getting you somewhere completely different now. Okay, let's jump back to GDPR Spring. I love how you said that.
I actually have an answer to a partial answer to your question. I think. I think the traditional proprietary vendors are facing a challenge here. They are still selling well to the enterprises, but not so much to the disruptive companies. And if you talk to them, they often have an attitude that, well, if you just put all of your data into our platform, everything will be fine. Whereas the modern companies, they go to open source and they go to the cloud. And if you use either open technologies or cloud technologies, you get a bunch of building blocks. and you integrate them yourself, which is very different from the sort of holistic platforms that we've seen in the past. And these sort of holistic companies, they have a challenge ahead of them in relating to that movement. And I've in some cases I've observed them, doing okay, having integrations with Hadoop and cloud on the cloud and so forth in a way that's reasonable. In some cases, I've seen them say, "Oh well, you can't use Git or versioning control tools without our commands. We have our own version control system." That's no. Then you go to somewhere else, right? So there's a challenge in this move towards more openness and more bits and pieces that you put together.
Cultural thing of you already built something, how will you bring something new in, and what's the value and the purpose of
but people expect tools, components with a smaller scope these days, but that do one thing really well, and that's how all of the disruptive companies, those are the building blocks that they use. And I think we will see a trend there. I'm not sure it answered your question or not.
No, it was some good shared insights. That's the point here. David, what do you think about that? About being very specific in the value that you bring? I guess we're talking a bit more about the consumer B2C side or B2B as well. Did you see that?
Bringing value to customers and that kind of thing?
Yeah, exactly. You can just pick up anywhere you like.
Well, I think one of the fact of the matters is that, we're here talking about innovation. And if you're trying to be innovative, meaning, coming up with new ideas, you can't come up with the same idea everybody else has come up with. You're going to try and do a new trick and bring new value and get a competitive edge and do all these things by copying all of the other, your competitors and buying the same tools as them and doing all the same tricks as them. That's not going to give you a competitive advantage. And, you can bet on that your employees are 10 times more intelligent than your competition's employees and can use the existing incumbent tools better than the competition. And that might be the case. But it's likely not the case. And so the only recourse is to go to cutting edge stuff. And you have to find a balance that works for your company. Now, a recurring theme, though, in the panels that we had today was that everybody was saying that today's tooling, although it is a bunch of building blocks, seems very reasonable to expect that you can implement something useful in 1 to 3 months, which is a far cry from these 24 plus month for ERP system integration projects that we've seen historically. So speed is the key here. Every company can afford to spend 1 month on something that is potentially high value. And so what we've found in some of our engagements at LakeTide is that it's not even the speed of implementing data science, but rather the companies themselves culturally aren't ready. Oh, who is it that owns this data? And that kind of thing. You'll feel that companies aren't even ready to react that quickly. So the speed of innovation is happening rapidly, and the tooling is ready to help you do a disruptive project on short notice if you're ready as a company.
Yeah. We have the technology. I mean, we had VR, artificial intelligence, since the 30s. So what's the problem here? It's the people. How do you make the organizations move with this? So at Disrupt Synergies, we do the simulation with, for example, the test beds, and the UK have the regulatory sandboxes where you can actually simulate on pre-hand. Maybe you do that as well at your company, where you can test and simulate before you actually roll it out in action, and you create this environment where it's kind of an acting environment with different components, both the digital but also the interaction with the behavior from consumers, etc. It's kind of a minimum viable product tested. And I think what we heard from the IoT stage is that this design thinking and testing a minimum viable product, being closer to the customer, that's has been repetitive over the panels throughout the day. Can you rely to that from your stages?
Again, we saw some good examples at Klarna where they pointed out that it was really easy to throw out new data pipelines and run several versions in parallel. And that's how most mature companies work with Hadoop or with data pipelines in the cloud. And this gives a much higher speed of experimentation, because you can, without disrupting the existing production infrastructure, you can test multiple things in parallel and do experiments. And whereas with sort of traditional non-big data techniques, every experiment that you did was potentially destructive. So there was less isolation, and that is a paradigm that I believe brings much higher innovation speed.
From the linear to the non-linear.
Something like that. Yeah.
I guess we could be standing here all night, but also we have some people waiting for us, wanting to come up here. So I guess we're gonna say thank you for tonight.
See you next year.